Hey everybody, today I'm going to be doing some sort of retrospective of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition. By the way, this is a brand new book, reprint from Drive-Thru-RPG. If you're interested in this edition, you can buy brand new books of it on Drive-Thru-RPG, which is pretty cool. Yeah. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through this book, and it's going to spark my ideas about all the problems I have with this edition, with this book, with all the 3 rule books of this edition. And also, it's going to spark my love of it, I think. And I'm just going to do this unscripted, going through this a whole book in some sort of podcast format to try to answer the question to myself, like, how good of a game is this really? Because I know I like playing it better than I do playing 5e. I know I like playing it better than playing a lot of games, but what do I like playing about it? Is it the game itself, or is it the house-ruled version of the game that we play ourselves, that is our version and not necessarily the one that's in the book? Because there's so much of this edition that we just don't use because, frankly, it's just a bunch of garbage. I think this edition is probably the most inconsistent edition of all the old school versions of the game. It contains so much stuff that's bad, but also it contains more classes than the other old school versions of the game before it, and it contains a lot of good stuff too. A lot of dark flavor that is taken out of the BX versions and also of second edition. Things like the assassin class, and also like even the artwork showcases more people who are not heroic, who are gonna do some bad things or have bad things done to them. Look at this, for example. Like, this is the image of the thief it's called a thief, not a rogue. He's going to steal from this poor guy while doing some intimidation with having his knife to the throat of the guy. So yeah, these are the heroes you get to play as. Nothing like the artwork of characters in the players' handbooks of newer editions that are more inspired by Tolkien and good versus evil type of fantasy. While this is inspired by Tolkien fantasy a little bit, by Lord of the Rings, in terms of the fact that it allows you to play elves and dwarves, because when Gary made that game, Lord of the Rings was very popular, and a lot of his players and different people around the world he knew would want to play elves, or already told him they wanted to play elves and different characters from Lord of the Rings. So he knew that if he added elves and dwarves and halflings into this game, halflings are his off-brand, non-copyright infringing version of hobbits, he knew that it would help the game sell more, because the people who want to experience a story like Lord of the Rings would see this book as a tool that can help them create their own Lord of the Rings that they can experience with friends, which I think is one of the main appeals to a game like this. But Gary himself, Lord of the Rings, he didn't necessarily hate the book, but it really was not his favorite type of fantasy books. He was more interested in Conan, in things like Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, in even H.P. Lovecraft. He was more interested in the weird sword and sorcery fiction. And the type of experience that you can get in this book is tailored more to give you an adventure that's like a story in a Conan short story than in a great adventure like Lord of the Rings. And you are incentivized to kind of be an asshole somewhat when you're playing a character in this game, because trying to be a hero in this game is probably going to kill you. And you just don't have the powers to do this. And there are so many. The book also implies that it's okay for you to be kind of like a Conan character, more like a morally gray character who's going to steal money and going to be not necessarily trying to make the world a better place. You can certainly play a guy of good alignment, but at the same time, the way you earn experience in this game is by gaining gold through adventure and through combat and through stealing it, essentially. Whether you steal it from the dungeon of an evil sorcerer or from the castle of a good lord, a good local lord, it doesn't matter. It's the same amount of experience, and this means that it's very easy for a player to find that banditry, theft is possibly the best way to level up their character and gain benefits in the game and become stronger. And this game was not designed for a single group adventurer working together. It was designed more for a big group of people, which might sound weird for a lot of people listening to this, because nowadays we expect to play Dungeons and Dragons with the same 6 people every 2 weeks or once a month or whatever time frame you're using. But back then, it was more you have a group of like 20 to 30 people who are all meeting together in the same place, and they have groups that are running simultaneously with different dungeon masters, but some groups are evil, chaotic, other groups are in the team of the lawful alignment, and maybe you're going to get to create a castle when you're high level as a fighter that the thieves from the other alignment are going to try to steal from, and then you have to defend your castle and build an army and build defenses. And that's the type of play that they have. When you have a dungeon, maybe your team are going to try to go to the dungeon, but maybe you don't find all the treasure, but now maybe the other team is going to go back another day and try to explore the dungeon now that a lot less monsters are there, and try to steal the treasure that you have left. Like, that's kind of the way that this game was designed to be played. And Gary Gygax talked about the importance of keeping strict records of time and making sure that we know what character is where at which date. And it doesn't really matter if you're playing a game with the same group of people and they're all working together in the same team. But when you have a game where you have a lot of different players, like 30 players who are playing in the same world, if some of them want to do some PvP, player versus player type of shenanigans, well, it's important to know who is where at which date. So that you can adjudicate if they can do their stuff or not, if they can go steal that treasure before you get it, or that sort of thing. And alignment doesn't really make sense today now either, because nowadays, it's cool to know that your character, he is a good guy, which means that he believes in voluntary self-sacrifice and practices this belief, but or that he's not and believes in the sacrifice of others, which is evil, or lawful and chaotic. But your characters are all going to be in the same team, probably, and this alignment rarely comes into play for most groups. But back then, when you have this group of maybe 30 players who are working in the same world with a lot of different DMs, and some of them might want to work against each other, well, it kind of starts to make sense to have these alignment systems, because now you maybe have a god of chaos, and this god of chaos knows which players are on his side and can then give them quests, and then the chaos guys can work together. The god is played by a GM, obviously, but like the chaos guys are chaotic becomes like a team. It becomes like the faction that you're working for. It's not just a descriptor of your character's personality. Like, if you're the chaotic guy, you're in the team of like the goblins and the monsters and the demons. While if you're the lawful kind of guys, well, you have access to some exclusive classes like the paladin, but now you are bound by strict codes of conduct, and also you're going to be working with the local lords and that sort of thing, and you're going to create your own castles eventually when you get high enough level. It's just a really different kind of game, and it's hard to tell you whether or not you should get this game right now based on how it was designed to be played, because who can create a group of 20 people to play that game? And even then, even back in the day, I would assume that most people did not play the game the way it was designed, with the intention of having really a big group with people from different factions working against each other, with strict timekeeping to know what character is where at which date. And people were supposed to play multiple characters back in the day, not just one character. So that's another thing that people don't get about it. And the strict timekeeping, like if you have a character who's like halfway across the world at this date, but the adventure happens at the same date, but your character is too far away to play, you have to create a new character and to engage in today's adventure. And so that kind of explains as well also why this game is much more lethal than 5th edition, because you're expected to have a lot of characters anyway. If one of your character dies, well, it doesn't really matter that much. It's not like you've lost all your emotional investment into the game. So that's a lot of rambling to get started. I feel like opening this book right now, instead of just creating this history of Dungeons and Dragons before I even open the book. But let's see what this book has to offer that can spark other interesting things to talk about it. So one of the first things that's interesting about this book is when it comes to creating characters, it is the first version of the game that uses the 4d6 drop the lowest method for creating ability scores, generating ability scores, and it allows you to order the different results in the order that you want across your ability scores. So before this version of the game, you wanted to create a character. For each ability score, you just rolled 3d6 and kept whatever you rolled and put that into the ability score, and you could not reorder your ability scores. If you wanted to be a fighter, but you rolled like a 4 in strength and 3 in constitution, well, you had to keep that. You could either choose another class that would be more in line with the capabilities of your character, or decide to play your class anyway, and despite the handicaps that low ability scores and those important abilities would bestow upon you. But yeah, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons is the first edition that is designed so that you get characters that are more the way that you want them to be, and more characters that are competent and strong. So if you create characters with like 3d6 down the line, like 3d6 for every line of ability that you have, so 3d6 for strength, 3d6 for dexterity, so on and so forth, the average score you're going to get per ability is going to be like 10.5. And that's like an average character. But if you do 4d6 and drop the lowest, which means that for every ability score, you roll 4d6 and you keep the 3 best, on average, you're going to get results that are more like 12, which is above average of a normal human. And in this book, it says that I don't remember if it's this book specifically, the Player's Handbook or the Dungeon Master's Guide, but it says that if a character doesn't have at least 2 15s in their abilities, they need to be re-rolled. Like, this game assumes that you're supposed to be above average characters, and the reason and the fact that it lets you arrange the ability scores as you want means that you can really create the type of character that you would like to play and imagine yourself playing that excites you. So another thing that's interesting about abilities is that this edition is very weird. For example, strength. The strength gives you 5 different bonuses, and intelligence, like 1, you don't have like a predefined ability score bonus like in 5th edition. Like, you don't have your strength bonus is +5. No, you have your strength hit probability bonus is +2, but your damage adjustment is +3, but your weight allowance is plus 1,200 coins that you can carry more than normal people, and to open doors, you manage to open doors on a 1 to 3 instead of a 1 to 2 for most people, and you to bend bars and lift gates, you roll a d100 and you get 20% instead of other people who maybe get 7%. Like, that's so weird. Like, that for one thing, I just started to talk about different rolls that were not based on a d20 roll. and they were based on a D6 roll or a D100 roll. Like, one of the things about Gary is that he really liked to play with probabilities and try to find the best dice to use to give a realistic or the best possible distribution of possible results to create the best experience possible, which means that he used different types of dice for every type of roll. And he created tables for results for a lot of different things like diseases and a lot of different things that never really happen during play for most people. So these books are bloated with different ways of adjudicating, with experiences, with types of scenes or types of conflicts that almost never happen, instead of just giving you a few standardized methods for adjudicating almost all possible conflicts that you have to resolve. One of the things that really was awesome about 3rd edition and the new editions of Dungeons & Dragons is that nowadays, if you want to accomplish a task, it's very easy for you to know how you are going to ask your players to roll to see if they succeed. It's always like roll a d20 and try to roll high. It's never like roll a d100, like roll 2 d10. One of them represents the tens and the other represents the individual units, and try to roll under a certain number. Like maybe you need to roll lower than like a 35. Like why sometimes I need to roll high on a d20 and sometimes I need to roll as low as possible on a d6. Like, you succeed if you roll less than a 3 on a d6 to open a door. Like what? And also maybe you might be wondering, like, what is this open doors roll? Like, it's actually a roll to be able to open doors that are stuck in place, that you try to use your strength to make the door unstuck so that it opens. Because in the original version of Dungeons and Dragons, you can't just open a door in underground settings. Even if the door is unlocked, it's still stuck because the dungeon is a hostile environment against you. And if a monster tries to open a door, it opens automatically. But players, they try to open doors, but they don't work. They need to push the doors open. So that means that monsters can chase you and you can try to run away, but you can't open the door. The dungeon is against you. The dungeon prevents you from opening the door. So you need to have a bunch of players spending their turn pushing into the door, and every player is going to resolve their actions at the exact same time. It's not like modern 5th edition where when you play a turn, each player has their turn one at a time. In old versions, everyone told the DM what they were going to do with their turns, and then you roll for everyone at the same time. So maybe you're going to decide that 3 players are going to try to open that door simultaneously so that you have enough of a high percentage chance to open it so that next turn you can get out. Or maybe you're going to try to only have 1 player trying to open that door, but maybe he's going to fail. Are you going to take that risk? Like, that's a different type of play, and that's kind of interesting in my opinion, even though it might not be that realistic. But again, it's a fantasy game, so who cares? And also, it's weird that if you roll an 18 strength, you need to roll another dice to roll, like, how good you are compared to other people who rolled an 18. Like, if you roll an 18, then you need to roll a percentage dice. And if you roll low on that percentage dice, you're like almost barely better than someone who rolled a 17. But if you roll really high on that second dice, like, you can have a +3 to hit and a +6 to hit instead of like a +1 to hit and +2 to damage. Sorry, +3 to hit versus +1 to hit, and +6 to damage versus +2 to damage. Like, it's crazy how much better some people who roll an 18 are compared to other people who also have an 18. This game's balance is crazy weird. And you can also get lucky and roll high in some stats, and that gives you superpowers, psionic powers that other people don't have. And if you have low stats, first of all, you have a lower chance of getting psionic powers, like being some sort of psyker, like an X-Men type of character with special abilities and on top of your class. And if you roll high, you can get that. And on top of that, if you roll high, you can get access to some of the better classes. Because and races, if you roll low, not only do you have only access to the bad classes, but also you have less chance of getting these psychic abilities. And also, if you do get these psychic abilities, they're going to be less good than they would be if you had better stats. It's really weird. But this game, even then, like stats, if you get a stat that's lower than a 15, it doesn't give you anything good. You have to get a 15 or more, and 16 is better than 15, 17 is better, and 18 is like much better. Like it's a weird distribution where it's kind of like exponentially better what your benefits are the closer you are to the best things that you could roll. It's not like a normal straight line distribution like modern Dungeons and Dragons, where you get a +1, then a +2, then +3, then for like every distribution. Like here, it's like if you roll average, you get nothing. If you roll slightly above average, you get slightly thing. If you roll a lot above average, you get some tremendously good results. It's really weird. Next, oh yeah, that's interesting. The way that magic users worked is that you had a chance to know spells. So when you try to learn a spell, you have to roll a die to make sure that you really learn it. And if you have low intelligence, you have a really low chance of being able to learn spells. While if you get like an 18 intelligence, you get 85% chance of being able to learn a spell. While if you roll like a 9 intelligence, you get only 35% chance. Really weird. And none of the books teach you how to adjudicate standard. Well, let me rephrase this. This book is really hard to play for people who try to play it by the book because there's a lot of situations that it just doesn't tell you how to resolve. For most modern games, they give you rules designed to resolve all the situations that are not covered by the rules, but this game doesn't do it. Instead, what it does is it gives you rules for dozens of different things, but how do you determine if you manage to climb the cliff? Climbing, maybe there's something, but let's say you try to jump from one ship to another in a ship combat. There's nothing in this book or any other books of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, the core books, there's nothing about this. But there's no place where they talk about how to adjudicate things that are not in the books. So you really have to make your own rules for that on the fly, but they don't tell you how to do that, or it's not as obvious as in modern versions where it's always roll a d20 and try to roll high. Like it's easy to adjudicate new situations, but in this edition, it's just like, hey, let me teach you about all the different dice probability, how it works, so that you can determine what type of dice that they can roll that would give the most realistic percentage chance relative to what you feel the situation should be. Like maybe you would feel like a 3d6 would be best, but they need to roll more than 14 because you feel, it's just weird. It feels like ultra weird attempt to, well, let me rephrase this. Like, who loves doing that sort of math or weird stuff to the point that they want their game to be built like this? Like, I feel like this caters to such a low amount of people. It's just weird. I don't even know how to express it. I just feel like it's unwieldy. And I understand that some people will find this appealing, the idea that you'll learn through the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons DM's guide how dice probabilities work and how the chances of succeeding in different type of dice pools are, and then to be able to adjudicate every situation by trying to imagine like what's the percentage chance, like how it should be adjudicated and what kind of dice to be used for that. Like, I mean, some people are going to find that interesting, but I think for most people it's just going to be so complicated, boring, and not easily usable that is just going to seem like an inferior system to a lot of modern systems. One of the main guys at TSR back in the day, his name was Frank Manser. He actually made one of the editions of Dungeons and Dragons back in the day. And what he said is just like, you can adjudicate every situation by just rolling a d6 and determining what chance the person has to succeed out of 6 approximately. And I think his approach was just so much more useful. And this is what should have been put in the game, frankly. Like, just ask yourself, how likely are they to succeed out of 6 or out of 10 in my estimation, in my quick estimation, and just say like, hey, I think you have a 3 out of 10 chance to succeed. Just try to roll a d10 and try to roll 3 or less. Like that's useful. That's usable. That's easy to use to adjudicate situations. But what's in these books is just so hard to use. And so many things in these books are just not easy to use. Like, the way these books explain how the game is played is really bad. I think a lot of people who played this game didn't have too much trouble because they were coming from the basic versions of Dungeons and Dragons, which themselves were designed to be good teaching tools for people who have never played Dungeons and Dragons. And I think nowadays, if you go back to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, maybe because you've already played a game like D&D 5e, it's going to be easier for you than someone who've never played a role-playing game. But it really is a bad game for teaching the game, because I don't even think it was designed to be a tool to teach you the game. I think it was just designed to be a tool that you get after you played basic Dungeons and Dragons for a bunch of time. But yeah. Let's move on. Let's see what this sparks inside my subconscious to see these pages of these books. Oh yeah. Depending on which race you play, you have limits to the maximum level that you can reach. So yes, you can play, for example, a half-orc cleric, but you can only get to level 4. And the reason Gary did that, where he gave a lot of restrictions to how high of a level you could get with your characters, is because he wanted to control what kind of characters would be played by his players, so that he would have a good distribution that would reflect like what would be realistic for the setting in his opinion. Like, he wanted a lot of the heroes to be humans, so he gave less level restrictions to humans, but more level restrictions to other characters that he didn't want to become like the big heroes of the setting, or didn't want too many of his players playing. And some of the races and class combos are just not available. You can't play a dwarf druid. You just can't. And yeah, that's kind of a weird way to do it. But maybe if you have 6 or 7 players, like, no matter what distribution of classes they use, there's still going to be like just 6 or 7 people in the setting. But when you're playing with a group of 30 people, well, if they're all playing weird stuff like half-orc druids and, dwarf illusionists, and you have 30 players playing all these weird characters, well, maybe then it might give a bad experience or a weird experience to the setting. Maybe it's less immersive when you feel like every character that are of these weird classes. I don't know, just ideas that come to me. But, the environment that this game was designed for, the environment of play that this game was designed for is certainly different from the environment of play that is what most people nowadays experience. So maybe we should give some less harsh view to Gary for these weird rules. Yeah, in this version, usually the non-human characters have the advantage of being able to multi-class, and they have the advantage of being stronger with some extra abilities when they start out, while human characters have the advantage of having no level restriction, which means that they can get to max level, well, they can get to higher levels. And a lot of these non-human characters are limited to levels that are so low that they can't reach the perks of high level, such as being able to create your own castle and getting to start having your own retainers and becoming more of a political figure in the setting. Because that's kind of how it works. If you play with 30 people, well, maybe you play for like 2 or 3 years. Maybe a couple of your characters are going to get so high level that it's weird for them to participate in the adventures with the other characters. But at that point, they start being lords and start to create magician's towers for mages, and they start to have really, really big abilities, and they start to affect the world in a larger scale. And at that point, for them to go take care of small adventures feels weird, so they become patrons of the other characters. And maybe you want to make money, so you ask one of the other players who plays a high-level character, hey, you have money, is there something I can do for you that you can pay me? And the high-level character maybe says, hey, go adventure in this part to go see if you can bring me some magic items or whatever. And then maybe the high-level mage who can create magic items is going to give them something in return. Or, high-level mages can create magic items in old-school version of the game and create spells. And they can keep these spells secrets and only teach them to the people that they want to teach them to. And while fighter-y characters take care of managing castles and armies, while high-level thief characters manage thieves' guilds and that sort of thing. As you level up, you become more and more involved into high-level setting things. And then, your lord, your fighter lord, or your thieves' guild captain can start giving adventures to other smaller, lower-level characters. So it creates a really interesting ecosystem, and your assassin characters can get... Well, the assassin characters, that's a really interesting point to go into, is that one of the classes that has not been kept from this edition was the assassin. And you have a level where that's the minimum amount of money that you can accept for an assassination quest based on your level and the level of the victim. So you can't pay a high-level assassin player to go kill another player if you don't have enough money for that, because the higher level the assassin is, the higher the minimum amount that they are allowed to accept for that sort of mission, like the higher it is. So the harder it is for a player to hire a high-level assassin. But the high-level assassins are there, and they're designed for PvP. I think that's an interesting thing about it. They also have abilities that are interesting for a PvP type play, because if you hire them, they have the ability to change their appearance to look like someone else of of a similar size. So maybe they're going to pretend to be like a new first level character, but it was John's assassin character. Oh no, they paid to kill my character. Oh no. See, that's kind of the interesting type of play that can happen in a game like this. That won't happen nowadays, because we don't really play with these big groups of people in a big campaign with different factions and stuff. But it doesn't mean that this game is necessarily bad for more modern type of play. One other thing that's interesting is the racial preferences table. Essentially, Gary here says, hey, here are the playable species that your species are typically racist against. Like, I'm not making this up, because he wanted to create a setting that would be as immersive as possible. And, back then they had things like Tolkien's books where elves and dwarves had some cultural anger against one another, and he wanted to bring that sort of element into his setting. So this is not prescribing what your character is supposed to do and how he's supposed to roleplay, but he's saying, hey, your culture are usually having a bad attitude against this culture and a good attitude against this culture. Like, it's not prescriptive, but you are sort of encouraged to roleplay your character in a certain way to fit with the way that this setting is designed. And half-orcs, because of their origin, are hated by most people or distrusted. And, if you play with 30 people and you have and they start all taking this kind of setting element seriously, like, that can bring some interesting immersion and interesting social dynamics between the different players. Next, let's go into the races. Like, the races that are playable in this edition are the same ones from that were kept all the way to 3rd edition. So you have your humans, dwarves, elves, gnomes, half-elves, halflings, and half-orcs. So the 7 that are also in Pathfinder. 1st edition. I think 2nd edition probably has new ones, but and this is the first book that had all 7. The previous editions of Dungeons and Dragons and the core books, you only had human, elves, dwarves, and halflings, like in the Tolkien books. Like, if though the characters were not represented in the Fellowship of the Ring, they were not in the Dungeons and Dragons book, but in this advanced 1st edition book, they added this section of half-elves, half-orcs, and gnomes. Next, let's go into the classes. So the way the classes are designed is to engage with this group dynamic, this big group dynamic, in interesting ways. Not every class has, the classes vary in how much they affect the group dynamic, the big group dynamic of like the 30 or 20 people you're working with. For example, the druid at high level, the cleric at high level can start to create a temple, but the druid is much more interesting for the high levels, because the way the druid works is that over a certain level, there's only a certain amount of druids maximum that can be at a high level. So if, for example, you want to become the great druid, which is the 14th level druid, the only way to become the 14th level druid is to kill the 14th level druid. So you have this weird dynamic within the druid players to see, you don't want the other guy to kill you, but the other guy might want to kill you to take your place to become like the 14th level druid, because your level, you can't gain an experience after a certain point. You can only take the place of other druids. So maybe your druids are going to ally together to kill another druid in the setting, or another druid that's in the other faction, or, that can be interesting play. Next, there is the fighters. When you're high level as a fighter at 9th level, you start to establish a castle and you start to attract followers. So you start having an army, start having a lot of workers, servants, that sort of thing. And if you're lucky with your fighter or paladin, you can start to attract really interesting followers, like maybe griffins, or and I think it depends on your alignment. If you're like a chaotic or evil fighter, you're going to attract like more like demon-like monsters, or goblins or something like that. When you're more a lawful fighter, lawful good paladin, you're going to attract more like humans, dwarves, elves. So that's an interesting thing. The paladin is also interesting because as a paladin, listen to this, okay? As a paladin, you can only be lawful good, so you cannot work with players who are like evil or chaotic. I'm not sure I remember which, but like you really can't ally with one of the factions with the chaotic guy, and chaotic guys, and if you're playing with 30 people, like maybe that's half the room that you just can't play with and can't adventure with, and you can't even interact with them and help them even in a indirect way. Like, if there's any point where your character can know that what you can do, it can be helpful for the other faction in any way, like you can't do it at all. And you also can't adventure with the same party for 2 adventures in a row. So you play your paladin once, and then you go play your paladin adventuring with another group, and then with another group, and then you can come back to the first group, but you can't just play your paladin and adventure with the same group over and over. And that's kind of a balancing factor, because paladin is one of the strongest classes in the game. They're really strong. They're the most broken class, at least at first level. And if you start to play this game like a modern D&D game where you just have a party of 6 players working together, well, Paladin is really strong at first level, especially against undead or summon monsters. I think they can't even like touch him. Like, he's just like a walking invincibility barrier. And he also has a lot of cool powers, like cure wounds with his lay on hands ability, and he's just a slightly better fighter in other ways. Then there's the ranger, which in that edition is really weird. It's kind of a tank. It's not like a less tanky fighter that's better at long range combat. It's actually a fighter that has even more hit points. So they're even harder to kill. So they're the best frontline fighters, but they're also working similarly to paladins, where they have alignment restrictions and they have to work in the benefit of the good alignment. So the people who are believing and practicing the philosophy of voluntary self-sacrifice as the right way to live. So yeah, that's interesting. The magic users and illusionists, they can share spells with each other when they they can share some spells with other magic users and illusionists, and they can start to create spells when they're higher level that they can then decide to hide or share with other people. As I said earlier, they can create magic items as well. Thieves, they can create their guilds when they're high level. Assassins can be hired by different players to kill other players, but I think assassins are only for like chaotic alignment players, I think. Well, I don't know. I think thieves, I don't remember. I think there's alignment restrictions for thieves and assassins, but I don't exactly remember which. If I remember correctly, like if you're more like lawful good side, you got access to paladin. If you're more like chaotic evil side, you got access to assassins, something like that. So it's like the early version of World of Warcraft, where the Horde had the shaman class that the Alliance didn't have, but the Alliance had paladins that the Horde didn't have until Burning Crusade. Yeah, a lot of this design of this game just reminds me of the MMO experiences that I had. When you play with 30 different people and you team up with different people at different times and you have a lot of PvP, it really starts becoming an experience that has a lot in common with MMORPGs. Next, what else? There's monks as well that you can play. Never tried them. Well, some of my players tried them. They worked not too badly. But one of the things about monks is that they use the same abilities as thieves, and also assassins also use thief abilities. So thief abilities are, let me see, pickpockets, open locks, remove traps, and find traps, move silently, hide in shadows, hear noise, climb walls. Instead of the 5e list of skills, that's what you have, but only thieves and assassins and monks can use these abilities at all. All other classes can't even use these abilities. So it's kind of weird. A lot of people interpret the fact that move silently is a thief skill and hide in shadows as a thief skill. They believe that it means that other classes cannot sneak around, but that's not what it says. Thief skills are not like in 5th edition where they're just abilities that everyone can do, but thieves can do them better. In this edition, every thief skill is something extraordinary that normal humans can't do. Like here it says move silently. So when you roll for move silently, you're not rolling to see if you sneak. You roll to see if when you move, you make absolutely zero noise, like silently, completely. Everyone can sneak, but only the thief can move silently, and assassins and monks. And then there's hide in shadows. It means you can become invisible in shadows. Like you can lift your cape or something in front of a shadow, and then you become totally invisible and you hide where other people could not just hide easily. And hear noise. It's more like hear noise when the noise is so small that most people would not be able to hear it. Climb walls is climbing sheer walls where there's no handles. Like thieves, even at first level, have an 85% chance of being able to climb walls of castles, walls of buildings, walls of cathedrals. But the thing is, the higher the wall is, the more damage you take if you fail the roll. So that's kind of the balancing factor. Yes, you have an 85% chance to be able to climb the wall of the tower all the way to the window, but if you fall, you're probably going to die. So that's how it's balanced. And if you think about that for PvP, it can be interesting. Like your group of thieves are going to try to infiltrate Johnny's castle to see if you can steal his gold. And even like the book before this, like original Dungeons and Dragons had pages on how to create your own castles for fighters and characters like that. But yeah, just imagining him, it gives me so much joy and so much excitement about the possibilities of a big game like this with so many players. It sounds so fun. And what else can I see? Oh, the thing also is there's no rules for sneaking for characters who are not thieves. So that causes a lot of problems for a lot of game masters to try to figure out how to make that work. Because sneaking is like one of the most common things that players do in RPGs. So the fact that this edition does not give you rules for that is crazy. You have to make up your own rules for sneaking. You just have to. Or you decide that only thieves can sneak around. Like that's an adjudication that some people decide to do. But everyone has to make their rules for that. And also you have to make your own rules for climbing. And sneaking is probably the and hearing noise, I guess, for some people. It might want people to roll for that. There's no perception checks in this game. You have to adjudicate what players hear or don't hear and decide what dice to roll if you want them to roll dice or not. The game is really not having all the rules that you would expect. I think Gary expected you to make your own rules by knowing probability and dice distribution and all the things that he shares about that in the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide. Kind of weird. Next, here's a list of typical languages that people can choose when they roll high intelligence. So it says that the languages available are dependent on the DM. So the DM is going to determine what's in this setting and tell you what you can learn. But here's a list of like 9 common languages that can be picked. Interesting. I probably saw that earlier, but you get to use these books and you always flip to the same pages after a while because you just use this book like a tool. You don't really reread it top to bottom every page after a while. So this game has a big equipment list. One of the things that's interesting about the Player's Handbook of this edition is that it does not include all the rules of the game. It doesn't tell you how many spells you know at first level for a magic user. It doesn't tell you how to roll to hit a monster. It tells you some stuff, but a lot of the stuff is just left for the Dungeon Master's Guide because Gary, I think, wanted to keep some control over the games, over how the games work, and leave that to the DM. So the DMs could decide how many spells the players had and how combat worked. Where nowadays, with all the rules being in the players' handbooks, players can start to be rules lawyers and complain to DMs when DMs don't follow the rules of the book as they're written, and then try to turn the gaming table into some sort of courtroom where they try to make their case as to why the DM should change his ruling so that the player gets what he's due. Or it creates weird experiences nowadays that the players have access to all the rules. And I feel like it's sad that this book by itself, Player's Handbook, is not a complete rule book by itself that allows you to play the game with all the rules in it. But I understand why there's value in keeping all the rules, or maybe not all rules, but a lot of the rules away from the player's hands. Here, players have rules necessary for creating their characters. They know what the classes are, what their magic powers are, and what they do. They know what are the things that they can buy. These are all player-facing things, and including paying for different professionals that they can hire so that they come with them in dungeons or help them with different services. This is all the things that a player needs to know about the game, because the players are not supposed to run the rules and determine the chances of success, or complain to the DM that the chances of success of their actions are too low compared to the design of the game or the designer's intent. Like, that's not how this game is supposed to be played. So next, there's spell tables. There's so many spells in this version of the game. And a lot of modern games, especially in the OSR, do spells differently, where they have minimalist spell descriptions and they have few spells, or sometimes they have generators to create random spells that players can use. But this book uses more the approach of having tons of spells, but the spell descriptions for every spell are so detailed and long. It's annoyingly long, honestly. It feels like the grappling rules for 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons. It gives so much detail about how the spells work, and there's even more detail in the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide as well for the limitations of the spells. But if you think about it, this game is designed to have a lot of different dungeon masters playing simultaneously, and a lot of different players playing simultaneously, and having standardized spell lists and very clear rules of every spell as to what's the range, components, casting time, what are the limitations of the spell, what the spell does exactly. Having these long texts makes sure that there can be kept a consistency about what the spell does across the different dungeon masters in your playgroup. And also, at the time, there was the idea that maybe you would take your character to your other game with another dungeon master and another group, and you would want your spells to work the same way. And it's also a game that was designed for tournament play, I hear. And if you design a game for tournament play, well, you want players to be on the same page about what the spells do. And yeah, that's might sound weird to a lot of people, but tournament play was big for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. They would basically do conventions where they would create tournaments where players would choose which character to play from a list of different options, and then they would play with a lot of players through some sort of dungeon adventure, and based on how well they performed, they would get different amounts of points for every scene, every room, or accomplishing different objectives within the adventure. It would be timed. So it's an interesting thing that most people don't think about, tournament play, but you have to have standardized rules if you want to do tournament play. Kind of like you couldn't play like Magic the Gathering if it had rules that changed from table to table. Like the fact that every Magic card always works the same every time makes the game playable across different shops that you can go to and with different people. And I think viewing this version of Dungeons and Dragons as something designed to be played with a lot of different people with standardized rules explains a lot of how the spell list is designed and why it contains text that's so long and annoying to read through. The basic versions of the game, which were released simultaneously to the advanced version of the game, had the same spells, but the descriptions of the spells were much shorter. But that game was not designed for tournament play. Like basic Dungeons and Dragons was designed for play at your table with your family, with people who are not so deep into the game that they want to get the advanced version, pretty much. And basic versions of the game were designed to be easy to play, easy to understand, and they include a lot more information about how to play the game and how things are done, while this one is a lot less clear and much more designed as kind of like a rules reference book and less as a book to teach you how to play. It kind of expects you to have played the basic version of the game first. So, would I recommend this book to new players or new dungeon masters? I think that it's not an easy game to run. It's long to create characters because of all the different bonuses that you get for all the stats, and also there's a lot of things that there's a lot of extra steps in character creation that are not in basic Dungeons and Dragons. And I think basic Dungeons and Dragons, if you're going to go old school, is almost the same game, but much more streamlined and easy to understand. The only advantage I think that advanced Dungeons and Dragons has, if you're going to play like a modern game with like 6 or 7 people in the same group always, rather than do this kind of MMO play, like the only advantage that this book has over like basic Dungeons and Dragons is probably the fact that it has more classes, which are cool to play as. To be frank, like basic has 7 classes, including 3 that are just like races. Like it's got pretty much like just fighter, cleric, thief, and mage, with a variance for the 3 main non-human races. But this one contains a lot of different classes that you can play as and a lot of different options that are not in basic D&D. So maybe the best way to approach old school would be to get basic D&D, but add in the extra classes from this book. And this game is just so not designed for modern play. There's so much that's clunky about it. I like it a lot, but even I don't play this game the way it's designed to be played. Even I ignore a lot of the rules in these books. And ultimately, I think, like a lot of people, I just play it like BX, but with extra classes. And I think that's just showing how, as a whole, this edition is just probably inferior in terms of rules to BX, which has become the most popular OSR base for on top of which most people build their games. But yeah, I think I'm going to end there. That was an interesting hour of going through this book and thinking about my different experiences with the book and the interesting things about it. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions, ask me in the comments, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Take care.